In 1895, the impossible happened. Over the course of 3 days, 2 feet of snow buried the subtropical Gulf Coast. Cities like Galveston, Houston, New Orleans, and Lake Charles all woke up to see something that had never been seen before. Flurries were even reported in Tampico, Mexico, possibly the furthest south observation of snowfall in recorded history. This winter storm, occurring this far south, was nearly impossible. Everything had to line up just perfectly for this generational event that would likely never happen again. But 130 years later, history repeated itself. On January 21st, 2025, a blizzard stunned the French Quarter. Winds over 35 miles an hour, blinding snowfall, and urban streets covered in ice. For the second time in history, the entire Gulf Coast was suffocated under a thick blanket of snow. In a time where warming oceans are leading to hotter temperatures in the deep south, how could this blizzard possibly have happened? What are the ingredients that are needed for a deep south winter storm, and despite warm ocean temperatures, can we expect this to happen again in the near future? Today we'll dive into the Bayou Blizzard of 2025, explore the meteorological conditions that caused the generational event, and retell the incredible stories that will be remembered for decades to come. In order to get a blizzard this far south, you need to have the presence of Arctic air in very low latitudes. This Arctic air is usually kept in check by the polar vortex, a rapidly spinning column of cold air extending into the stratosphere. When the polar vortex is stable, the Arctic air stays mainly north of 50 degrees latitude, with small deviations that circulate around the globe. However, the polar vortex often breaks down in winter. The air in the stratosphere can warm by tens of degrees, and the spinning motion can slow down and even reverse direction. When this happens, the cold air aloft can spill outward into lower latitudes, and the cold air near the ground can more easily be forced southward. This happened in February of 2021, when a lobe of Arctic air swung down as far south as northern Mexico, causing a devastating freeze for the entire state of Texas. The freeze lasted for 8 days, causing 10 million power outages, dozens of car accidents, food shortages, and dropped the squirrel population statewide by over 50%. Before we get back into this historic winter storm, I want to thank today's sponsor, Private Internet Access, the VPN I actually use to keep my life online protected when I'm traveling to film these videos. An unprotected internet connection is basically an open broadcast. Private Internet Access works by hiding your IP address and sending your connection through an encrypted tunnel. Hackers on public Wi-Fi, your internet service provider, even random snoopers on the network, none of them can see what you're doing. Using it is as simple as it gets. I just pull up the app, pick a server, tap connect, and boom, your connection goes from a wide open coastal highway to completely locked down. One subscription protects unlimited devices at the same time. That means my studio PC, my laptop, my phone, and even the tablet I use for Doppler radar when storm chasing, every single one is covered. PIA also lets you access content from all over the world, streaming services, sports with regional blackouts, even websites that are normally region locked. If you want to watch One Punch Man on Netflix here in the States, hop on a Canadian server and you're good to go. And the best part, Private Internet Access has a strict no logs policy. They never record or store user data, and that's been proven multiple times in court. Right now, you can get 83% off Private Internet Access, which comes out to just $2.03 a month, plus 4 extra months completely free by using my link below. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support, so trying PIA is totally risk-free. Head to piavpn.com/weatherbox to protect your digital life with Private Internet Access. Severe polar vortex breakdowns can have devastating effects when a cold wave enters southerly latitudes and stays there for an extended period of time. But the polar vortex was stable in January of 2025. In fact, it was spinning faster than normal. It was slightly elongated in an elliptical shape, but the polar vortex is rarely perfectly round. Sometimes this elongation, when situated so that the major access points towards the United States, can be enough to trigger a major Arctic front that sweeps across the Great Plains and East Coast. This exact process began on January 12th when a large ridge began building over the North Pacific into Alaska. Temperatures near Fairbanks soared to 50 degrees, well above average for the time of year. This anomalous ridge meant that a major trough downstream was likely, and on January 17th, the jet stream began to dive south over the central United States, with an accompanying cold front at the surface. By the morning of the 20th, temperatures were in the 20s across the central Gulf Coast. But cold air itself won't make you snow. You need the second ingredient, rising moisture. There are several ways this can happen. In the Great Lakes region, warmer water can heat the air, which rises and condenses into snow on the lee shore. This can also happen with saline bodies of water, most commonly in England from the North Sea and also Japan along its western coast. But in order for this to happen, the cold air must flow across the water and onto land. The orientation of the Gulf Coast does not support this air pattern, as the cold air would have to be located to the south of the shore. Due to its proximity to the equator, this never happens, and so moisture must be forced upwards another way. Thankfully, Mother Nature has a specific way of redistributing the energy in the atmosphere, and that is through cyclogenesis. When a sharp temperature gradient exists at the surface and a trough in the jet stream approaches, an area of low pressure will form. This air will continuously rise into a column spinning counterclockwise, and fronts will form as the low gets stronger. The cold front will redistribute the energy in the atmosphere, lessening the temperature gradient. A side effect of this is precipitation, and with winter cyclones specifically on that northern side. Warm air rises in the warm sector, flows north into the cold air, condenses as snow, and falls in heavy amounts on the northern side. This is how the vast majority of snow falls across North America. When Arctic air spills down to the Gulf, an explosive temperature gradient inherently exists due to the sheer warmth of the Gulf waters. The one ingredient left is an approaching trough in the jet stream, and this is the main reason why a Gulf Coast blizzard has only happened twice in the last 130 years. The timing has to be just right, with the approaching trough reaching the Gulf just as the Arctic air sets up shop. And late in the day on January 20th, this is exactly what happened. As a small trough approached El Paso from the west, air began rising just off the coast, twisting into a surface low. This area of low pressure deepened rapidly as it moved eastward, pulling in the rich Gulf moisture, which rose and condensed. As it approached the cold land to the northeast, the surface low fed off this difference in temperature, continuing to pull in moisture. As this moisture ran into freezing cold air on the northern side, snow began to fall in Houston, Texas. The stage was set for a rare, perfect blizzard of epic proportions. It was the evening of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so all the children were off from school. Having flashbacks of the 2021 deep freeze, the state organized emergency vehicles, opened warming centers, and pre-treated critical bridges, overpasses, and streets. Citizens did their part by staying off roadways, draining outdoor sprinkler systems, and gathering supplies beforehand. The result was an uneventful, magical snowfall. Large puffy flakes floated down on South Texas. As the 4-day work week quickly became just 3, children built snowmen and people took to the streets on skis. The southeast suburbs of Houston saw nearly 6 inches of snow due to the close proximity of the surface low center. But as the low moved northeast in the overnight hours, it deepened rapidly, and a winter storm warning was extended for nearly the entire Gulf Coast. But the winds kept increasing off the coast of Lake Charles, and with sustained wind speeds over 35 miles an hour, the Lake Charles staff were faced with an incredible reality. This met the criteria for a blizzard. In the entire history of the National Weather Service's winter weather warning operations, there had never been a blizzard warning issued for anywhere along the Gulf Coast until now. As residents of Lake Charles and New Orleans woke up that morning, they were greeted to palm trees bending in tropical depression force winds, but this time with massive snowflakes instead of rain. With the entire city shut down, snowball fights broke out, snowmen were brought to life, and street performers and musicians took the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to march through the French Quarter and play the soundtrack to the Winter Wonderland. Minor league hockey player Jay Krupp successfully skated on the empty, ice-covered Canal Street, stick in hand, likely the first person to ever play hockey on the streets of downtown New Orleans. Snowboarding and sledding were also common sights throughout the day. Icicles dangled from the water fountains. But it wasn't all fun and games. While Houston officials advocated against dripping faucets due to the increase in water demand, New Orleans residents would have greatly benefited from doing so. The science is simple. When water freezes, it expands, and that expanding force can burst pipes. Keep water flowing, and it reduces the chance of it freezing. Gretna resident Tracy McGuire initially let his faucet drip before turning it off Thursday morning, but 4 hours later, the pipe outside his home burst. It took over 24 hours for plumbers to navigate the icy streets and fix the issue. Many South Louisiana plumbers worked 15 to 20-hour days following the blizzard. The good news is that most jobs were fairly minor, indicating that residents took the freeze warnings much more seriously this time around than in years past. The 8 inches of snow seen in New Orleans was the most since the Great Storm of 1895. As the Gulf Coast low pushed northeast, the snow band on the northern side took on a more southwest to northeast orientation, extending from New Orleans all the way to Richmond, Virginia. This is due to the inherent curvature of the Gulf Coast. The Gulf low will follow the temperature gradient northeastward until it gets pulled across the Atlantic Ocean. In Mobile, a new snow record of 7.5 inches was set at the Weather Office, the previous record being from the Great Snowstorm of 1895. Kids slid down hills in kayaks and storage bins. 50 miles east of Mobile, 10.5 inches of snow was recorded near Pensacola, Florida. The hot spot in the area was Bayview Park, one of the few public areas in the city that offered a hill for sledding. As the low continued up the coast, the snow totals lessened slightly, except for at the Outer Banks, where 9 inches of snow fell at Kitty Hawk. Tourists and photographers drove several hundred miles, in some cases to photograph the rare event. As the low moved off the Atlantic coast, the temperatures stayed well below average in the Gulf states, as the Arctic air stuck around for a few days. A problem that surfaced was the sun. It was strong enough to melt the snow little by little every day, but that water would refreeze as a thick sheet of ice overnight. It would take the better part of a week to fully melt and for temperatures to return to the mid-60s. But that's not the end of this storm. As it moved off the coast, the jet stream above it strengthened, causing the low to deepen rapidly as it flew across the warm water. In just 48 hours, it approached the coast of Ireland with 85-mile-an-hour winds and a pressure of just 941 millibars. This storm was so intense that the hurricane hunters based in Lakeland, Florida, flew to Shannon Airport in Ireland to take observations as it made landfall. A record-shattering 114-mile-an-hour wind gust was observed at Macehead Atmospheric Research Facility. The storm toppled thousands of trees, cut power to nearly 1 million homes, and cut the water supply to 250,000 homes. What was a magical and relatively harmless winter storm in the US quickly became a generational, catastrophic storm for Ireland. We know that 2 things are happening that affect the winter here in the United States. First, the ice in the Arctic is melting, leading to warmer temperatures near the North Pole. Additionally, the number of freezing winter days since the 1970s has drastically declined in the Sunbelt of the United States. Our southern winters are getting warmer. However, some scientific research suggests that maybe we're in an in-between phase where the polar vortex is subject to increased irregularity, meaning that while the weather is getting warmer overall, cold Arctic air can and will continue to take anomalous dives down into more southerly latitudes. And when it does, the warmer waters in the Gulf help fuel these intense winter storms. As for the Bayou Blizzard of 2025, the timing of the trough in the jet stream approaching the sharp temperature gradient between the cold land and warm ocean waters was key for this historic snowfall along the Gulf Coast. And at some point, it will certainly happen again. I hope all of you have a fantastic holiday season and a wonderful new year. As always, if you'd like to send me something weather-related or a letter, my P.O. box is on screen.